men are quietly kind of rejecting the old script that says that strength means that we have to be silent, promote an air of dominance or emotional isolation. I'm seeing a lot of younger men asking different questions, like not how do I win, but how do I belong? How do I lead without losing myself? How do I be strong and emotionally present at the same time? And that's a signal, when the questions change, the culture kind of follows that. This new era of masculinity, it's not softer either.
Hey, y'all, it's Danny C. Welcome to the Happy Life Agenda podcast. I'm so excited that you're here today. As you know, this podcast is dedicated to female empowerment, finding your true identity, and ultimately living your happiest life. I embarked on this journey a little more than a year ago and has been full of powerful lessons. And one lesson in particular has inspired today's conversation. And what that is that men need support right now, too. I know, gasp. Before you dive in, let me introduce today's guest, and you will understand exactly what I'm talking about and why we're having this conversation. So if you've listened to my podcast in the past, you've met today's guest. I am so thrilled to have Dr. Rick Mask back for another great conversation. Dr. Mask is a professor of global studies, speaker, and author on social capitalism, and his work is so pivotal in this era because, as we've discussed, technology, including and especially AI, has immensely transformed how we connect or how we believe we should connect. And so, Dr. Rick, thank you so much for coming back and chatting with us today. We're going to talk about positive masculinity. But before we dive in, can you tell everyone a little bit about, you have a new book coming out, you're going to be speaking in Dubai in March. So tell me what's going on with you.
Thank you, Danny. It's so good to be back here with you and sharing this space with you. Yeah, I've really lately been focused on just the intersection of masculinity, connection, and social capital. In my current book that I'm working on, Starving for Connection, it looks at how we've built systems that prioritize productivity and dominance and individual success, but it's often at the expense of human relationships. I am speaking globally in Dubai about leadership, emotional literacy, and what it means to build healthy communities in a fractured world. And honestly, positive masculinity or masculinity in general is right at the center of that conversation. So.
Wow. Oh my gosh. So many exciting things coming for you in 2026. So I know we're going to all want to follow along with what you have going on. So let's dive into this conversation. I've been really excited. It probably comes as no surprise to anyone that, when I speak negatively about the patriarchy, it kind of shakes things up. I know in my own social circles, I've gotten into some sparring debates a little bit. And so, it's reigned for centuries. And many of us see this as like, okay, this created wealth. This created this economy that allowed us to thrive. But that comes with that side note of for some. And I've seen it many times. I've said it many times. And a lot of my guests have as well. Conversations aren't about taking down the patriarchy or demonizing men. These are conversations about how do we elevate the feminine equal to the masculine. And when you and I talked last time that you were on, we really kind of touched on that, is that you've had some experiences that a lot of females can relate to. And so as I've, worked through my research, been doing this podcast for almost a year now, the stories that have been passed down for centuries aren't ones that just impact women and minorities. Even for all the benefits of a patriarchal society, men are suffering too. Men have not been granted the space to express or embrace sadness, or even to feel like they can set down their anger or power, because that's simply not what men do. So just like women were conditioned for goodness or niceness, men have been conditioned to build up these walls and forsake all else to provide. Even when we think about the caveman days, the story is told that he leaves the cave and goes and is gone for days, kisses his family goodbye, and for risk life and limb to bring home some food while the women and children stay at home. But what if that story isn't true? What if, they actually moved around and he went out and hunted for the day and brought back food and was home by dinner? Or what if the wife went out sometimes and the husband went out other days? Like, we actually don't know because we don't have all of the information to say this is exactly what happened. So that's where I want to turn to you, Rick. If those stories are different, Is there a world that exists where men don't feel like that they have to work all of that time? They can stop and enjoy dinner with us without, one eye on the laptop. And do you see, a new era of masculinity as we head into 2026?
Absolutely. I'm really focused in. You had made commentary about patriarchy. Patriarchy is a construct, and there's a lot of constructs in our society that I think we need to question and understand how they were created, understand what's holding them up, understand what truths are there or falsities are there. And I think right now, from a global lens, what's striking to me is this shift is not just happening in one culture. It's emerging everywhere. So across Europe, Southeast Asia, parts of Africa, and North America, men are quietly kind of rejecting the old script that says that strength means that we have to be silent, promote an air of dominance or emotional isolation. I'm seeing a lot of younger men asking different questions, like not how do I win, but how do I belong? How do I lead without losing myself? How do I be strong and emotionally present at the same time? And that's a signal, when the questions change, the culture kind of follows that. Um, this new era of masculinity, it's not softer either. I think people see this as like, well, if we're not being this strong stoic force, it's not softer, it's just more integrated. It's blending strength with more self-awareness, ambition with responsibility, and leadership with relational accountability. I think we're seeing the benefits as men of being emotionally available, being our full self, and how pouring into ourselves is actually helping us be who we need to be for those around us.
Wow. Wow. All of those statements were super impactful because it's matching like what men are known for with some of the softer stories and shadows that we haven't allowed men to confront. So I just can see your research on all of this is so exciting. So, we talked a little bit about this. Name of this podcast is positive masculinity, but there's a lot of conversations around toxic masculinity, and this term has been debated for years. There was a 2025 study that 61% of men feel pressured to hide emotional pain. 48% said they have no close friends to confide in. So how do we start to reframe masculinity so men can reclaim connection without shame?
I think that we as men have just been taught that emotional pain equates to weakness. And when we're told that over and over and over again, it causes the nervous system to shut down. If you attempt an action and it's met with negativity every single time, or met with a statement like, don't do that, you shouldn't be doing that, your nervous system gets trained at a very early age to shut down. So it's not an issue of us not feeling, it's that we've been trained to not name what we're feeling. We haven't been given a safe space for that,
Wow.
particularly by other men. Reframing masculinity starts by separating emotion from incompetence. Emotional literacy isn't the opposite of strength, it's what allows strength to be sustainable. Um, we reclaim connection by normalizing language for ourselves to be able to say to those around us that I am overwhelmed, I am feeling grief,
Mhm.
I don't know what to
Mhm.
do. Um, and I think just like when we take the time to do that and have a safe space to do that, and it's viewed as part of the natural human condition and not viewed as weakness by us or those around us. Um,
Right.
that we're able to thrive and actually get outside of that shame. Um, I think one thing that we're battling is there are a lot of men, older men, and we look to elders in our society for guidance, that would look at that as weakness. Or even
Mhm.
I've ran into women that are very much focused on upholding the patriarchal structure, and also have shamed men for demonstrating, that they are overwhelmed or not being able to complete something or saying I don't know. Um, and I just think we need to get to a place in society where there's space for us to share emotions.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's a really good point. Is men or women, and especially older generations. I mean, I can think back to playing sports and different things, and it's like there's no crying in baseball. Suck it up
Mm,
and get out there. Go out and
yeah,
get it done. I don't care if you're tired. And I mean, for all intents and purposes, I feel like that was an era that I grew up in, and that's
yeah.
kind of the things that I've been unraveling. So, do you think that there's a we're able to have this conversation and make some impact on Generation Z and younger generations. But the older generations, they are going to need some coaching, and there's a lot of unraveling to do. So do you see a world where we can help these men lean into this new era of masculinity that are kind of have been conditioned for something else?
Absolutely. I think that, we have to lean into like social capital, which is something, I love to talk about, Danny. But it's like social capital connection with people, it lives and dies in relationships. Male friendships are incredibly important. And I'm not talking about this underdeveloped form of relationship that I see a lot of men have and that I have with some of my male friends where everything's kept very surface level and sharing, admitting to our male friends that we are overwhelmed, that we don't have the answers. I think it's not, there's not a lot of safe spaces to process that failure, grief, uncertainty. Um, and when we have these male friendships that are all surface level or are eroding because of lack, somebody tries to share something deep, and you see it in popular culture. There's a group of men standing around, somebody shares something deep, and everybody gets quiet or steps away, or it's just an uncomfortable scenario, and then they go back to something light. I think it really weakening male to male connection is weakening our community and our society as a whole. I think there's a lot to learn from the older and younger generations coming together. I think, you know, the younger generations have a lot of an awakened perspective to bring to the group to say that, it is okay that you share your feelings, your emotions. It's okay. You have space to do that. And then hopefully, with the older generations who do have a lot of lived, learned experience and skills to share, them entering into that space and feeling comfortable sharing how they're feeling will then open up for an opportunity for true connection and then knowledge sharing, skill sharing between the older and younger generations. I think there's a lot of good reflection there between Gen Z and older generations that can happen when we take advantage of a space that allows us to actually express those feelings, a safe space with a group of men. And I think that's why men's groups are incredibly important. I was part of a men's group last year and I enjoyed it immensely.
Amazing. I like that. So you talked kind of, how men can reshape their friendships and even expand their circles to include older and younger generations. But let's talk about the women, because I know a lot of my audience is female. And so how can we as wives and mothers help the men in our lives, the boys that some women may be raising, be this type of man and kind of help guide them, create that safe space for them. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, well, I think honestly, it's up to the men to do it. But it's just being a supportive structure and encouraging because core strengths for healthy masculine leadership that I've seen is just emotional literacy. So women coming into a space and initially attempting to hold space. I know that can be hard. I know that because what we started with talking about the patriarchy, we've dealt with a situation, particularly where there's been a patriarchal dominated control over our society, and it can be hard to hold space for that. And I do completely understand that. But trying to hold space and encouraging the man to seek out emotional literacy, the ability to identify, tolerate, communicate what's going on with them emotionally, and encouraging them to find spaces to process that. It's not just the family and the wife or the sister or that's not a dumping ground for everything. Women have an amazing resilience that I just admire so much, but it's encouraging the man to form emotional literacy for their self and processing space for their self, encouraging them to have a protective presence, which is creating safety without being controlling. So I think that there is still a need for in positive masculinity for us to use our voice, use our presence in a protective way, but it's protective, creating safety. And part of creating safety is being emotionally aware. I'm not just creating safety for the people around me from other male presence or other outside forces. I'm creating safety for the people around me by understanding myself. Like providing with purpose. So encouraging men, like you're not just a financial support for this family. You don't just go leave, make money, and come home,
Yeah.
worn out and tired. We need you holistically. So finding ways to just support men seeking out methods to earn money or provide for the family or cooperate with other members of the family to make it all work and not think that there has to be this martyrdom mentality about taking on everything for themselves financially. Um, Accountability, encouraging men to be accountable, like
Mhm.
coming to someone and saying you're sorry before you understand the offense. That's a huge thing. When somebody runs up to, I see, children do it. Obviously, I've seen grown men do it. Just go, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. When you're saying you're sorry like that, it's not taking accountability and apologizing and demonstrating you want to change the behavior. Taking accountability like that is essentially saying, please don't be mad at me. Please don't be mad at me. Please. And that's I just want to get away from that. And I think that really comes from men not being able to hold space for the emotions of their partner.
Mhm.
When a wife, a girlfriend, a sister, whoever is upset, men just want to get that corrected as quickly as possible because they don't have the capacity to hold space for themselves, much less for someone else in their life. So it's really about taking true accountability, understanding how our actions harmed, allowing the other person to have emotions in our presence and that be okay. The people
Yeah.
around you are allowed to be upset. Um, and you should hold space for that. Hear what they have to say, understand the offense, and then go in for an apology. And then honestly, just like being more community oriented. So it's not just about me
Mhm.
attempting to work on myself and influence my sphere, but having conversations like this, Danny, where I can let other people know, like, I'm here for you. If there's any men that want to reach out, I want to talk to you. I want to help you
Yeah.
grow and be better for our society as a whole. Like that, those are like those core traits that I think really need to be fostered and supported. But I really want to just say again that it's up to men to make those changes and
Mhm.
women coming in and helping to support men in making those changes is incredibly important. If if a man knows that these changes, are what are being looked for or what are being valued by the women in our society, I think that will influence the conversation tremendously. Stepping away from this patriarchal support structure and just saying, like, these core tenets, like, these are what we want to see men doing. I think that is a big influence on men in general because even inside of patriarchy, there's this want to, um, you know, take care of those around us.
Mhm.
Um, and like I said, not in inappropriate ways, in ways that we've been taught. So it's like take advantage of the fact that we want to show up and take care of people, and then help redirect us to the things that actually make that happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, okay. A lot of the men say, well, the patriarchy is what is able to, put food on the table and it's what makes us money. It's the reason business exists. I come
Mm.
from the standpoint that I believe if we're all showing up in our gifts and bringing value, male or female, that is what is going to attract the wealth, attract the money, and that there's opportunity for all of us to step into our gifting, and that is what is going to make wealth and successful, not just for the few that hold the power. So do you believe that? And when men start stepping into this emotional space, how can we say, like, hey, you're going to be okay, money's going to come too, business can still thrive?
I've had that reflective point myself, so I'll get a little bit personal here.
Sure.
There was points whenever I was, on my journey. I think that one of my previously I viewed it as my strength. Through my ADHD, I have the ability to be a very head down operator. Like I can get pretty much anything done, but the cost to me doing things that way is that I do put my head down. I don't show a lot of empathy to those around me, and I end up pretty much taking on the entire task myself, which leaves me exhausted. And even though I had been through many, many different schools of leadership training and thought, from situational leadership to transformational leadership to just, I mean, like formal training programs through my employers and things like that, I still hadn't really incorporated holistic delegation into my leadership practice, which is mind blowing because, when I reflect on the size of teams that I led, the amount of things we were able to accomplish, I'm not surprised that I was exhausted, burnt out, worn out all the time. So I think, as part of my journey, like I've had times where I felt extremely emotional. When you're going through that like dark night of the soul, or you're going through these
Mhm.
reflections on all these times where you weren't able to share your emotions, and I'll be honest, a lot of that was self-inflicted.
Mhm.
But I didn't show up as my true self. I ate the emotion, I pushed it down, I did whatever. At the end of the day, I was just completely disassociating from emotion. And when I was going through my dark night of the soul, I was going through these emotional times, I would just be sitting there and I'd have to take a minute or whatever and step away, and I would be emotional. I'd be crying. I'd be whatever. And I'd be like, man, it was so much easier whenever I could just disassociate. Like, I feel like I could do so much more. And what I came to realize once I worked through all that, process that, made healthy modes of processing and working things out, holding space for those around me.
Mhm.
Like, I have the capacity for so much more because I do have the proper methods to delegate. I have the proper methods to incorporate the opinions and the processes of others. I've learned more because I'm more open
Mhm.
to hear what other people have to say. So it's just like how it's helpful, for me personally, I think broader society, if we all step into that space, I think we genuinely can approach projects, work, life, religion, whatever we're pursuing, more holistically. We genuinely hear others. We have space for ourselves for empathy. Therefore, we have space for others. We can genuinely incorporate the opinions of others, the processes of others, the physical labor, the mental labor of others into the things that we do. And you truly get a team, a group dynamic that can get us to really, really cool, interesting places. I think that helps in pretty much every facet of business, getting to the best place, not just the singular place, no matter how hard a worker is, no matter how intelligent a singular person is. Um, but like through the years, being a mentor, being a leader, I was really blinded, and I helped other people progress. I helped other people succeed. Um, but I didn't really get to know those people. And I really trained them to do things my way,
Mhm.
versus what could have been a really beautiful, holistic, collaborative creation together. Um, so I just see it as really beneficial, not only for other people to grow their skill set, to connect with others, create relationships, but really just help our society as a whole incorporate those other viewpoints. Because as it stands, that's something also that the construct of patriarchy protects as well, is that we can have these, you've probably heard the term good old boy clubs or
Mhm.
whatever, where
Oh yeah.
people bring in people that are like them, who think like they do. Or in my instance, like, I could bring in people that I've trained to do things exactly the way that I would do them, and that creates these monoliths within companies or industries
Mhm.
or anything of thought and everything else. And it really, it's just reinforcing these singular, ways that I would do things, which is not helping me grow. It's just funny. I have to laugh at myself a little bit going around just touting, and now I am a true lifelong learner. Now I am open and hearing and growing. But saying that I was a lifelong learner and then essentially just promoting my way of doing things around me, it's just kind of, I don't know. It feels counterintuitive now.
That's awesome. Thank you. I'm like for sharing and like, wow, I'm just blown away by, what you just shared because even as a female, and I've said this before, I've really leaned into the patriarchal society and said like, okay, by gosh, I want to get to the top of the ladder. And so this is how we do it. And everything that you just described for this last year, that's been the shedding that I've been doing and the unraveling. And I used to stand proudly on a platform that I don't cry. And I struggled, even as a female, to have sympathy for my female team members and colleagues that needed to take that break to go to the bathroom and cry. And so now I've finally done a lot of the work where like it's like I cry again. And what you just said earlier about like, oh my God, it was so much easier when I could just disassociate and focus. And so I find myself sometimes going back to that conversation like, oh my God, life would be so much easier if I was just that again. But then I remember how miserable and unhappy I was, how I wasn't open to perspectives. I mean, all the things that you just said. And so
Yeah.
it's you know, we always say, don't say the grass is greener on the other side. But in this case, I would say it's totally true, because you can definitely look back and see and feel all of that pain again when you were just hyper focused on the work and you thought you were getting a lot done. But now, like you said, bringing in all of these other people, all of these other perspectives, and I get everything done in less time. Other people are showing up in their gifts. And I just am meeting so many incredible people who are getting the opportunity to be elevated that they might not have otherwise if I was doing what you described, which is what I was doing for a long time. It's my way or the highway. I'm only going to hire people like me, all of that stuff. So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that openly, because that was really well said.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Danny. And I want to say, just as a man in our society, just apologize for a long time, for years of creating an environment that was reflective of those behaviors as being, the way to move forward in business. And I think those replicated behaviors, that's part of that construct that has been perpetrated in our society. So I'm glad that you yourself have been able to step outside of that and are enjoying that as well.
Thank you. Well, I mean, thank you for apologizing, but I think what this conversation is opening up is really that we do need to give space for the shadows and stories that men are facing too. And let's all come. And I think I heard it on another podcast that 2026 is really that year to say, like, let's confront the shadows, let's confront the stories, let's integrate and become whole people, instead of just sticking with these constructs that have been around forever and ever. So on that note, speaking of behavior, like, I want to shift the conversation a little bit towards social media, because social media is, we can blame it all day long, but we all participate in it. But it is amplifying these polarized narratives about masculinity. It's praising hyperaggression. Some are calling for complete destruction. And there's even research now showing that social media algorithms boost alpha male content over anything else. And I've seen it just in my own scroll that women are doing experiments and seeing this happen. And so we all want to think that we're independent thinkers, we can rise above what we consume, but it really is quite dangerous to be consistently exposed to one-sided conversations. And the way that those algorithms work is whatever you're clicking and liking and stopping on is going to be continuously fed to you on your For You page. And so I liken this to, what I saw happen with the Me Too movement. And I'm going to be vulnerable and open myself up, is a lot of the songs and the music that we listened to in my era were, it was women being sexually submissive to men on a dance floor or in a club. And that when I go back and listen to those songs that were some of my favorites as a teenager and 20 something, I'm disgusted. And I'm like, oh my God, what if my daughter had listened to that? But the Me Too movement kind of pushed that stuff down. And that's not what we see. We have more of the Taylor Swifts and the, that are rising to the top. So how do we create a shift for men when all of this hyperaggression and polarization that they believe leads to wealth and power is just everywhere, and it's lighting up our social media feeds, and it's a dangerous facade? Like, what's your suggestions?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I really appreciate the band Tool. I like Tool. I just want to bring them up because they have a song called Vicarious, and it speaks to people's fascination with violence and negativity, and that's the thing. Like, algorithms, they don't reward wisdom; they reward how intense someone can be, or how much negativity can be displayed. Aggression, for whatever reason, to the human brain, can feel like certainty. It sells, but it's just this facade, this hyper domination of masculinity. What it really does, when we see these people, and you see these men get online, and they always have this dating advice from this hyper masculine perspective, and it just cracks me up. Because there are people that contradict this so much. There's one called the Speech Professor. He's hilarious. I just have to mention him here. If you don't follow, like, he's a great example of positive masculinity, because he will take these videos and just rip them apart. It's amazing. And then there's the guy, I don't remember his name, but he runs around with a red flag or a green flag depending on what's going on in a video. So he responds that way. But yeah, the Speech Professor is amazing. But what really happens when you behave in the way that's being detailed, by some of these people that are coming on saying, they're an alpha male or whatever. It's like, yeah, you drive a Rivian and you live in a townhome in upstate Ohio working for a tech company. That's not this alpha male presence. It's just this facade. What's really happening when you behave this way is you're just really eroding any intimacy, trust, long-term fulfillment that you can get from another human being when you are just diving into this disassociation and relying on content that purports that you have to be this quote unquote alpha male to exist in our society. It is really sad, and I always, if something is selling, it's because there's a buyer. So like you said, Danny, people are clicking on this, people are buying into this, and I just want to promote an intentional shift away from that and focusing on people like Speech Professor and others who are actually promoting like full holistic thoughts. Like they come in with commentary for these people. If they're ragging on the way women responded to them or whatever, he comes in like, explaining the holistic nature of the female being and, things that should be common sense. But I feel like men have almost been just brainwashed by all this aggressive, violent action. I think the shift that's going to happen, like with Me Too, men are going to shift when they realize that power isn't a viral obsession of aggression. Like it should be utilized in a relational way. Power over yourself to connect with others. Having wealth, even if you completely disassociate like we used to, Danny, and you run up at the business world, you get promoted. If you have wealth and everyone around you despises you, that's not connection. That's just poverty in disguise. We are social beings, and if you spite everyone around you to get money, feel like you're an alpha male, like what have you accomplished? You've just ostracized yourself from all those out there that would otherwise connect with you.
Wow, that's such a great quote right there. Is just like when you've gotten to the top and you have all of this wealth, but no, everyone despises you. That's just poverty in disguise. I really, really like that because I mean, we've, for as revered as Steve Jobs was, everyone talks a lot about like, he brought all of these great things to our world. He amassed a lot of money, but he wasn't a well-liked person. And,
Yeah.
there's a few other examples of that. We put that wealth and that power on a pedestal, but at the end of the day, would you really want to have dinner and share space with that person for very long? And
Right.
what keeps us alive, with some of the things that I'm going through personally with my family is I believe leaning into human connection is what's going to keep people vital and young. So as you watch parents and grandparents age, it's making the space and the time to spend more time with them because it's that connection that's going to keep them alive and well. And so from teaching our children that to, still replicating that for our parents and those generations that have been trained otherwise. I think that's such an important thing to emphasize. So thank you for sharing that because that was really well said.
Thanks, Danny.
So, yeah. So now since you've been on this journey, since I met you, you've really kind of leaned into like figuring out with all of the technology and everything, how many connections it takes to really be connected to someone. And I would say I kind of like, listened to that and have probably been doing my own subconscious experiment because what's been hilarious is there are several people, you included, that I've never met in person, but now like I regularly communicate with you and some of these other men and women. Y'all come up as if like you're friends in my everyday sphere, which you are, but I've never met you in real life. And I think, this made me think of you. Here, check this out. Just like I do with my friends that live down the street. And so you've talked about emotional literacy and how men need to embrace that and community strength. So what do men need to change first? How can they lean into what you and I have been doing, which is like, you don't have to go talk to your neighbor down the street if that feels uncomfortable or make best friends with your colleague. There is a whole world out there. And I don't know what your experiment has been, but mine has been like, you can really connect on the computer. And I know I'm probably going to meet some of these people someday in real life. But I feel like y'all are friends. So can you speak to that and how men can lean into it?
Absolutely. Yeah. My first grand experiment in this space actually started the month or 2 months before we went in lockdown for COVID. I actually met Tristan Claridge online because of my work with social capital. I found his website and reached out to him, and we held a connection online for 5 years before we ever actually connected in person. We formed the International Social Capital Association together. We passed work back and forth to one another before we'd ever actually met in person. And finally, I believe it was this year or late last year, we finally actually met in person. And since then, we've seen each other like 3 or 4 times in a single year because we were in Paris together. Like we just keep having to do, doing things together. Um, but yeah, so I've seen this, and what really like led us both to keep that going was intentionality. Like we had to
Mm.
want to do it and make time for it. And when we were gonna miss it, just reaching out and saying, I got to miss this meeting we've got set up because of whatever's coming up in our lives. But it was really like the grace when we couldn't meet, and then reciprocity there, that we did want to meet. We were always actively like, hey, you missed that last meeting, when are we going to set up another one? But I think one of the things that we can do to forge those connections really is starting with ourselves, and the changes we need to make are very relational. Like we need to create a better relationship with ourself. A lot of people don't understand that you have to have a good relationship with yourself. Your relationship with yourself will be reflected on every other relationship you have. So if you don't give yourself grace, you won't give other people grace. If you don't give yourself time to make mistakes, space to make mistakes, time to cry, time for your hobbies, you will not give that time to anyone else in your existence. So you just have to realize
Mhm.
that. Through that, you can create healthier partnerships. You can be better fathers. You can be safer for your work environment and the people that you lead. When this happens, like we discussed earlier, I really think there'll be an economic impact because we're going to see stronger teams. We're going to
Yeah.
have people coming to the table, being able to be their authentic self. We're going to have people come to the table with a new way to think about things that's actually going to be accepted, integrated, understood, collaborated with. That right there will drive lower burnout, and really create a leadership environment that is ethical. Well, when I see companies on their surveys, they're asking, "Do you feel psychologically safe at work?" And people, although the surveys are anonymous, I think people still feel like they're not that anonymous, and they're uncomfortable answering that question. But hopefully, we can see an environment when the question's asked, "Are you psychologically safe?" that people can say, "Yes, I am," and truly mean that when we create this
Mhm.
environment. I think too, holistically, when we see um, men embracing this emotional literacy, making changes for themselves and changes for their small sphere, you're going to see them be able to create more relationships, broadly, whether it be international or within other groups within our society, and really have more influence there. Also giving space for others as well. And I think holistically, we would probably, and then this is kind of going out on a limb, but I just want to say it. I think that this would help us to create less conflict and less
Mhm.
polarization, because when you come to the table holistic, when you come to the table as an emotionally literate man, you don't need to dominate other people to feel secure in who you are.
Yes.
And I think that's what drives a lot of the polarization, conflict, and I mean even war in our world.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, again, well said. The dominance, that was on another podcast that I was listening to, is like the association of power and dominance, and power doesn't have to come from that space. And so thank you for sharing that, because that's a really good point. So let's shift this a little bit to, where men can find these spaces to have these conversations, where they can find other men that will talk about this, be emotionally open. And, the conversations that you and I have had leading up to this is that emotional literacy, you've said several times. And I think that there's a spiritual component, and whatever you believe, God, universe, higher self, all of those things can fit into this puzzle, because I've talked about this openly on my podcast. I really struggle with constructs of religion. I grew up Christian, but there was a lot of control and there's a lot of dominance in religion, and including in Christian religion. And so a lot of the groups that I see come together, these men's prayer groups and stuff, is still reinforcing a lot of those belief systems that are still part of that religion. And so I like to say that it's a relationship directly with God, universe. And so what's happened to me on this journey is that I started working with women, and I go onto these networking calls that are both men and women. I say what I do, and I've ended up meeting a lot of men who are just reach out to me and ask more questions about, like, hey, how do I lean into this? I would like to be showing up more confidently, but I would also be like showing up as myself in that confidence. And so now I have a few male clients. It's really like exciting. And I never expected to be here, but I also grew up in a household with two brothers. And, so some of it kind of, I think, makes sense. So you and I were talking is like, we need to have workshops that are designed for men that confront the stories, that integrate the shadows, and give them the guidance and the tools. So I'm going to ask, Rick, this question of where you can find men to collaborate with, but he and I are going to be partnering on this. My website and branding is messy, which is almost embarrassing to say as a brand identity coach, but you got to start somewhere. So DM me on LinkedIn if you're interested. DM Rick. That's probably where I know that's a social media platform that I hang out on the most. But I think if you want to navigate these complexities, we're making space for that. So please reach out to Rick and I. But if Rick and I aren't who you want to talk to, do you have some, resources that men can look to?
Absolutely. Yeah. I would look for men's groups, but I would vet those. I would meet with the leadership of the men's group and understand what the content is there. Because to your point, Danny, it doesn't need to be a reinforcement of negative masculine traits. I think the competence that we're looking for is compassion, the ability to repair, the ability to listen, and the ability to show up consistently. I think the evolution there, what you're wanting to look for in those groups, is things that help you be consistently present and not about this alpha male charisma building stuff. I see a lot of these groups like, we're going to go out into the woods and we're going to, like, I don't like some of the stuff that these skill building exercises. I can
Mhm.
just see the root in like a toxic place. So I would just, find a group where you can talk, vet that group and understand, because what you want is some place to share. You want
Mhm.
to be able to share what's going on for you, learn skills to process those things, and then also get skills in holding space for others. There's a lot of people out there that have written books too, I found along the way, where they have come into contact with a version of their self that is just horrific to them,
Mhm.
and they wanted to move past that. And one book I read that I think was impactful for me was a book called Disrupting Divorce, and it was written by Cass Morrow. The book is really about understanding and accepting yourself and understanding that you don't sweep yourself under the rug. Like, I know what I have the capacity to do. I know the negative things that I have the capacity to do, and that person still exists within me. It's an active choice not to behave that way. A lot of people
Mhm.
will say, my old self is dead, or I'm not that person anymore. No, you're still very much that person, and it's understanding that you're choosing not to engage in those behaviors. That's
Yeah.
true accountability. And that's what you're trying to find when you are looking for groups that you want to connect with or people that you want to reach out to. So I just, if it's not Danny and I, if it is a group, just vet that group. I think that that's incredibly important. There are problematic pieces of religion, unfortunately, Danny, like you had spoken about. There's been a hyperfixation on the masculine within a lot of religions, and I won't
Yeah.
name any specifically because I'm not here to bash anything. I am very religious myself, but I think it's just in whatever space you're in, whatever religion you're a part of, just accepting and exploring the feminine aspects of that religion,
Mhm.
because without a celebration of equal importance therein, you can find yourself very easily in a conversation where it is a very masculine dominated conversation in a religious space. And it's
Mhm.
just giving reverence to the feminine and understanding the importance therein. And I think that just gets lost a little bit in conversations. But I think that goes back to the construct of patriarchy that's dominated our society, just as it exists in the workplace. It can exist in religion. It can exist in social clubs. So it's just, once again, it's being influenced by a construct, and I think that just needs to be recognized. Which is why I'm not here to say anything negative about any religion, because um, It's the patriarchal construct that's convoluting things in my mind. But yeah, I know that was a little bit long-winded, but it's, just finding those safe spaces. Like I said, whatever space you need to have where you can learn to hold space for others, learn to give grace for yourself, learn to process your emotions, and learn to take true accountability. That is the main things that you need.
Amazing. Well, thank you. That was so well said and very, very, accurate because yes, this is about knocking down those constructs and not really attacking any one particular person or thing, but it's how do we move into a truer, higher self and lean into, like I said, I believe in God, that who he intended us and created us to be from the moment that we were born, and finding that again. So thank you, Rick, for this incredibly insightful conversation as always, and some amazing, amazing tips that you've given us. So for all the women that are listening, because I know that's the primary portion of my audience, share this with the men in your life, share this podcast episode, or, bring up the conversation. I've said it before, it takes a unified voice for all of us to rise. And if we operate in these silos where it's just women coming together with women, or even just, alone, or men coming together with men, we need to all work together to be able to create space for each other to rise. And, you hear the phrase, it takes a village, and that is usually associated with raising children, but it's going to take a village to raise up a world that's better, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So
The next evolution of masculinity, just to reinforce that last point I was saying, it's not about becoming someone else and a part of you dying off. It's about becoming whole and understanding yourself holistically. You want to create a leader in yourself that can do all those things: holding space, growing, understanding accountability, understanding your own emotions, because it's about cooperation and growth, not about domination. And I just want men to step away from that.
yes. Wow. Thank you, Rick. So where can people find you if they want to continue this conversation? They want to read, they want to buy the pre-launch of your book, any of that stuff. Tell us where we can find you.
Yep. So LinkedIn, I'm heavily involved on LinkedIn. And then I actually have a website where I put it together like a compendium of the podcast, and I do a blog called The Social Capitalist, or just socialcapitalist.org. That'd be the two best places.
Okay, fantastic. Well, you all heard it. As you know, whenever I post the podcast, we do shorts and everything for a week, and Rick and I will be jumping into those conversations. So please dive into the comments, ask questions, ask for more information. We're happy to help. And DM us on LinkedIn if you're interested in one of those workshops. And so, Rick, thank you again for joining me today. And everyone who's listening, if you love this episode, click subscribe below, leave a review on your favorite platform, and I'll talk to you all next week.